Hi, this is Tom Lippincott, and welcome to Rhythm is Everything. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that I think does not get discussed nearly enough in the jazz guitar world, and that of course is rhythm. This is something that I think pretty much there's no disagreement among most musicians that rhythm is the most important element of music, and I've heard that my whole life, but when I was younger I would just hear people say rhythm is the most important thing. And that's pretty much all I knew to do, was to just repeat that and say, yeah, rhythm is the most important thing. Okay, great. And kind of hope it would keep getting better if I kept saying that. But, you know, through years of working on harmony and melody, you know, chord voicings, scales, learning songs, learning how to improvise a strong sounding melody, all in a pretty systematic way, you know, trying to be real organized about the way that I taught myself to do all that stuff. I never had any kind of an organized or systematic way of learning rhythm until a lot more recently. And I've found this to be a real help, not just for my sense of rhythm on its own, but to my overall musicianship. And the students that I've worked with, I've noticed the same thing, that when they get better working on rhythm in a systematic way, it really improves their playing all across the board. So today we're going to talk about a few small topics related to rhythm. Before we get started, I always get questions about this guitar. If you've never seen any of my instructional videos or aren't familiar with me, you may be looking at this guitar going, what the heck is going on here? There's a gazillion strings, how am I ever going to follow what he's doing? Well, the good news is that I do have 8 strings here, but the inner 6 are the regular standard 6-string guitar tuning, E, A, D, G, B, E. I just happen to have an extra high string, the skinniest string, a 4th above the E is an A, and then I have an extra low string on the bottom, which is a B, a 4th below my low E string. But whenever I'm teaching, even though I do use this guitar, I only use the inner 6 strings, and the tuning and the chord shapes are exactly the same as on a 6-string guitar. All the same stuff that you see, scale shapes, all the same. If you have any other questions about the fan frets or anything else with this guitar, I invite you to check out my website, tomlippincott.com, and there's more information than maybe you ever wanted to know about this guitar there, about how it got built and everything. And I'd also invite anybody that might be interested to check out other aspects of the website too. I've got a lot of instructional material there, and I've also got albums there, including my recent album called 20 Years Later, that's for sale there on the website. Again, that's tomlippincott.com. Okay, let's get started with our subject here. So this is going to be part 1 of this tutorial called Rhythm is Everything, and part 1 is going to cover a few basic things. Then we're going to get into learning in a real organic, physical way where each 8th note in a bar of 4/4 time is and how it feels. And then we're going to talk about 8th note triplets today as well. So let's get into talking about 8th notes. So I'm sure most of you know that most music in the Western world, at least, is in 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4. We divide the pulse into 4 groups of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if I divide each of those by 2, I get what we call 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and usually counted like that. And then of course with jazz, we're dealing primarily with swing 8th notes. So now these upbeats that I just was counting out, the ands, are going to be closer to the next downbeat. The most common way of explaining this, and this is a pretty good starting explanation, is if we take 8th note triplets where we're dividing the beat into 3 equal parts, triplet, 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 and we tie those first 2 8th note triplets together. And so if I'm tapping out the triplets and then I sing just the first and the third, bom, 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 And that's the basic template we're going to be talking about. Now, as a lot of you probably already know, there's a lot more to playing swing eighth notes than just that simplistic way of looking at it. There are so many different subtleties and variations that go into all the great jazz players' swing feels, and most jazz musicians pretty much spend their whole life getting those intricacies. And so, this isn't meant to tell you, okay, as long as you can, tie the first two eighth note triplets together and then go to the third one and do that accurately, then that's it. You're done with swing feel. That's just the beginning. But anyway, that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today, particularly at the tempos we're going to be dealing with, which are going to be kind of along the medium tempo range. Swing eighth notes also get a little more complicated in terms of the ratio when you get to faster tempos, but again, we're not going to talk about that yet today. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, I want to talk about the different places in the measure that eighth notes happen. And as the name implies, there's going to be 8 of those places. And what I've noticed is, even though this is something I've been dealing with my whole musical life, eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, I didn't have a real internalized way of feeling where each of those places in the bar were, the same way that we as guitar players get used to hearing this. Oh, that's major, that's minor, right? It's not, at some point you had to learn that stuff. Say, okay, it's got a major third, and you put your fingers here, and it sounds like this. But after you've been playing for a while, you just get to know that stuff instinctually. You don't even have to think about it. You hear major, and oh, that's major. Minor, it's like you recognize somebody that you know, right? You hear that and you know that's what it is. That is, I've noticed that great jazz drummers and a lot of great jazz musicians that are really strong with their rhythm tend to have that when it comes to the different places in the measure. I've heard drummers describe the and of 2 having a feel or a color almost to it. So we're going to talk about getting to know those places a little bit more intimately than just intellectually knowing what they are. So let's talk about each one individually. We're going to start with beat 1. Okay, so beat 1 is probably going to be the easiest one to deal with because everybody just about is already accustomed to beat 1 that's a musician. It's the beginning of most musical compositions when you count in a song 1, 2, 3, 4, it's even where the count in starts. And then on top of that, as guitar players, we're used to often changing to a new chord at the beginning of a measure on beat 1. So beat 1 is going to be the easiest one. It's the one that probably comes closest to you already have it really internalized. Okay, now how about the and of 1? Okay, so that's going to, and of course I'm talking about with a swing feel, so the and of 1 is going to be pretty close to beat 2. But still, when I think about what that feels like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I play a little 2-5-1 progression in G major, and I was putting each chord on the and of 1. To me, that sounds just kind of like an extension of beat 1. Beat 1 is kind of our home base. 2, 3, 4. And then if I put those chords on the and of 1, it just sounds like it still kind of belongs in that spot, but it's a little bit later. 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1. It's a little bit of the sound of surprise. So it's got a little bit of that, a little slightly unexpected and maybe late version of the home base beat 1. Now let's talk about beat 2. Now beat 2 should be real straightforward too because it's a downbeat just like beat 1. But think about something like this. That melody that Mozart wrote hundreds of years ago in older classical music, just think about what parts of the measure get the most emphasis in a melody like that. Bump, bo bump, bo bump, bo bump, bump, bump. It's really clearly emphasizing beats 1 and 3 powerfully. Beats 2 and 4 are almost an afterthought in that melody, the emphasis that they get. And most music from the European world and from the New World, even the United States early on, had that quality to it. And it wasn't until the African influence came in to jazz and blues that we started getting into more syncopated rhythms. And a good definition of syncopation is simply emphasizing the normally de-emphasized parts of the beat. And think about in Eine kleine Nachtmusik, the de-emphasized beats are beats 2 and 4. And of course, those are the very beats that jazz musicians, jazz drummers tend to emphasize, right, with that hi-hat, or even counting off a tune, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those beats 2 and 4 are the drummer's hi-hat clicking on beats 2 and 4. So, in a sense, beat 2 is a syncopation, if you look at it that way. And I think of it a little bit that way. It's a less obvious downbeat than beat 1. And then, again, if I play a 2-5-1 progression and put all the chords on beat 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It has that quality of being really strong because it's with the metronome, but it's not quite where you were expecting it to be. And what if I even do this? So there I set you up to hear the conventional stuff you're used to hearing where the chords change on the downbeats. And then when I got to the resolution chord, I wait for it, and then I hit the chord on beat 2. That really brings home that vibe, that mood that beat 2 kind of has. That, okay, wait for it, and then here it is. But it's still strong because it's a downbeat. Okay, and of 2, unlike the and of 1, which sounds to me like it's just an extension of beat 1, the and of 2, because it's so close to beat 3, which is that other strong beat in the measure, tends to sound like we're anticipating or looking forward ahead into beat 3. So I think of the and of 2 that way, and I think most people do. Most of you guys out there probably are already used to doing that. If you play some jazz, you play the and of 2, and it sounds like you're sort of anticipating into beat 3. We only have to look ahead, or look at Charleston rhythm. That second hit of each chord was the and of 2. And let's say that I have a 2-5-1 that takes up half that amount of space. I have 2 beats of A minor 7, 2 beats of D7, and 4 beats of G major 7. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I could get that anticipation effect by putting the D7 on the and of 2, something like this. Technically, this chord is played early, right? It's actually where it kind of doesn't belong. I'm putting it ahead of where it really should go, but our brain hears it as belonging on that next downbeat. So that's really the mood and the vibe of the and of 2 to me. Beat 3 we sort of just talked about. It's that other traditional strong beat. It's where we're used to hearing the second half of the measure delineated, and it's also, if we have 2 chords in the same bar, it's where we're used to usually having the second chord happen, just like I was doing before. 3, 4. So that one is also pretty straightforward and easy, delineates the second half of the bar, feels very home bass-ish, maybe this second only to beat 1 in terms of sounding like home bass and solid. Okay, and of 3. This is an interesting one to me because this, of all the eighth notes in the measure, this is the one it's the hardest to pin down for me. It definitely has that beat 3 but a little bit late quality that the and of 1 also has, but for whatever reason it's just not quite as obvious to me. So anyway, let's hear what that one sounds like now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now on to beat 4. Beat 4 is kind of the counterpart of beat 2. It's that other sort of syncopated downbeat. It's the other hi-hat click on a swing groove. It's the other snap when you're counting 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's got that quality, somewhat syncopated but still a downbeat. And this one is interesting because it can kind of sometimes feel like I'm getting to beat 3 extra late, the way that beat 2 has that quality, or it can also feel like I'm getting to the next downbeat of the next measure extra early. So let's see what kind of both of those sound like. 3, 4. So there's the late version. Now here's using beat 4 as an anticipation. That can be real effective using it that way. And then of course lastly we have the and 4, which is another one that most of us are probably pretty familiar with because it's so often used, just like the and of 2, as an anticipation. And this time we're of course anticipating the next measure, the next downbeat. And that's probably even more common than that downbeat of beat 4 anticipation. And that would sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. That's something that gets used quite a bit. So that's one that we're really used to hearing. Okay, so now that we've kind of just gone through these one at a time, I mean, you know, I'm basically just giving you kind of my take on how I view each one of those, what they sound like, and how I sort of remember and identify them when I hear them and when I want to play them. But now let's try actually playing some stuff. So what I'm going to do is put on a backing track, and this is just a kind of a one-chord vamp D minor, kind of a D Dorian sound. I don't have to worry about the form. I don't have to worry about chord changes. I can really just focus on the rhythm, and I highly recommend doing something like this when you're working on rhythm, is just get rid of all of the other variables as much as you can so you can just focus on the rhythm. And that goes for any kind of practice. You know, I try to eliminate other variables and just focus on this one thing that I'm trying to improve on. Okay, so here's my D minor backing track. And I'm going to start with the downbeat, beat 1. 2, 3, 4. Again, might seem really obvious, but still valuable to just play through this and really make sure that you're feeling where that beat 1 is. Maybe a test for me is to see if I can do this while I'm talking. Now I'll play some chords. And I can also try playing long notes or chords. Articulation will change the psychological effect, even though my right hand's still doing the same thing. Okay, so that's beat 1. Now I'll go to the and of 2. Make them long. Chords. Long. Okay, how about beat 2? 4, 1, 2, 3, 1. Long. Chords. And of 2. Long. Now long. Chords. Long chord. Beat 3. 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2. Feel how really settled that feels. Long chords now. And of 3. Long. Chords. Beat 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Long. Chords. Long. And a 4. 3, 4. chords. Long. Okay, now I took you through that really quickly, but in a real practice session, I would spend quite a bit longer on each of those. In fact, I might even just, devote the whole practice session that day to focusing on one of those places and really getting to know it well. Now, there's a little bit more sophisticated things you can do with this too. Once you really start to get that, to feel it kind of in your gut. Another thing that you can do with this is to do more typical improvising, where maybe playing some eighth note lines. But I'm going to give myself the rule that I'm going to pick one of these places in the measure. Let's just say the end of 2. And I'm going to say every time I start a phrase, it has to start on the end of 2. So toward the end there, I started incorporating some chords too. But that's a little more sophisticated way. That'll also, it'll help reinforce what we're doing here, getting to know where all those places are in the measure really well, but also can have the added benefit of helping with phrasing in terms of where you start and end phrases. I've noticed one kind of common problem that a lot of beginning and intermediate improvisers have is starting phrases always on the same spot, often right on beat 1 or maybe the end of 1. And this can kind of break you out of that habit if you just spend a day, okay, I'm only going to allow myself to start my phrases on the end of 2 or on beat 4 or whatever it might be. Another thing that you could do with that is to end your phrases in that particular chosen spot. That can be even a little bit more tricky. All right, the other thing that we want to do in this part is talk about eighth note triplets. The first thing I'm going to do is turn my metronome a little slower to 80 beats per minute. And incidentally, I didn't mention this before, but notice how I have my metronome set so that you can clearly hear where beat 1 is in the bar. I highly recommend practicing this way with a metronome whenever you use one, whatever meter you're practicing in. If it's something else, then you put the downbeat to beat 3, to every 3 beats if you're in 3/4 or whatever it is. But for 4/4, 4, 1. That way, if I'm in the course of practicing, if I accidentally lose my place, skip a beat, add a beat, I know right away that I'm wrong and I can correct myself. Whereas if I just have the metronome, all the clicks sounding the same, there's no way of knowing, and I've made that mistake for years. I probably, owe the universe about a couple of years worth of skipped beats that I did when I was practicing years ago. So anyway, now what I'm going to start with is tapping on my lap with my hands. And I'm going to tap out eighth note triplets. Triplet, 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 triplet. Now just this, if you've never done it before, could actually prove to be a little bit tricky. There's one little variable that happens just like when you're playing with a pick and playing triplets. You're going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. That means just like with your hands, now in my case I'm left-handed, so I was starting with my left hand. I'm playing left, right, left for the beat 1, and then beat 2 becomes right, left, right. So it goes back and forth every time because I've only got 2 hands, right? I don't have 3 hands to do 3 notes with. So that in itself can be a little bit challenging if you've never done it. Triplet, 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 and I can start counting different things vocally. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, all designed to kind of help me keep my place where I am in the bar, in addition to trying to tap out the triplets accurately. Okay, now let's look at the triplets individually for each individual partial of the triplet, the first triplet, the second triplet, and the third triplet. We're going to start with the first triplet, and that's going to be the most obvious one. It's just downbeats, basically. But I'm going to maintain the tapping thing, and I'm going to put accents where each one of the downbeats goes. So let's see where they go. 2, 3, 4. Notice that the downbeat accents go back and forth between my two hands. Right, left, or in my case, left, right, right. And again, if you've never done this before, it takes a little bit of coordination. Okay, now I'm going to go to the third triplet. I'm going to skip second triplet for now because that's the hardest one. But I'm going to try to put accents on the third triplet of each group. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, triplet, 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 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then finally the hard one, second triplet. 1, 2, 3, 4. Triplet, 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 triplet. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Okay, now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clap those rhythms. 3, 4, 1, down. First triplet, third triplet, and second triplet. And I can maybe try doing all those different countings that I was doing while I clap. Once I have that pretty comfortable, now I can try transferring it to the guitar fingerboard and try doing each one of those. I'll just pick the note D at the 3rd string 7th fret here, just as my starting point. First triplet, third triplet, second triplet, and just go back and forth between the three. Triplet, triplet, 2 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. So again, I'm saying some of the different syllables with this exercise as I'm doing it too. Now we're going to move over to the backing track, which is again at 110 beats per minute, a little faster. And I'm going to now improvise a little bit with the guitar, both with short and long notes and also with chords. Here's the first triplets again. Long notes. Chords. Okay, now I'll try third triplet, same deal. Long. Chords. Long. Now I'll try the second triplet. 2, 3, 4. Back to the downbeats just to give myself a feeling of groundedness here again. Back to the second triplet. Chords. Back to the downbeats. Now, this one psychological effect happens, you'll notice, that when I'm playing that second triplet, it's kind of a weird rhythm that we're not used to hearing, and it kind of gives this kind of off-kilter feeling, maybe uncomfortableness, and when I return back to the downbeats or a more familiar rhythm, we get this sense of relief, like, ah, I'm back home. Well, this is something that drummers and other musicians use to great effect to generate rhythmic tension and release. So you can do just as much tension and release with rhythm as you can with harmony and melody. And that's something I didn't start to realize until I started working with this stuff in a more systematic way. Okay, so that's going to do it for part 1 of Rhythm is Everything. Hope you'll join me for part 2, where we're going to talk about quarter note triplets and everything related to those.